Hey, thanks so much for clicking on my video. My name's Clark, and I'm going to share with you the story of how I was conned out of $10,250 by a con artist who was pretending to be a contractor. It's been a pretty wild ride. I've learned a heck of a lot since this journey began, and my hope is that I can share a lot of what I've learned with you and keep you from getting scammed, first and foremost. But if you've already been the victim of a con artist, my hope is that I can share with you what I've learned to try to help you get recourse, both criminally and civilly. And I'm going to go into a lot of that detail after I tell my story in some subsequent videos. But right now, my goal is to just kind of tell my story of what happened to me, and then I'm going to go into some things that I learned. What could I have done differently to avoid getting scammed? What did I not do that I should have? And I'll kind of like summarize all of that at the end. But right now, I'm just going to kind of tell the story of what happened. But before I do, I just want to put a small disclaimer out there that, I'm just an average regular dude who got taken for 10K. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not in law enforcement. I'm not an expert in anything. So just keep that in mind. Please do your own research. Get your own professionals to help you if you do have legal issues or things like that. I'm just going to share my story, and hopefully some of this will be useful to you. I also want to let you know that I'm out here in California, and what I'm going to speak to is specific to California. Every state has different laws. So what I'm going to be speaking to is for California, but keep in mind that a lot of these things definitely do translate to other states. For example, we have a state licensing board here. I would imagine that probably every state also has a contractor state licensing board. So it should translate okay. And of course, a lot of the stuff I'm going to say is universal, regardless of where you're at. So, all right. So my story. Okay. Last summer, I was shopping around for replacement windows for my house, and I went online and started looking up contractors. I looked in places like Yelp. I looked at a mobile application called Thumbtack, Home Advisor, handful of different places, and I found some local window installers. And I selected 4 or 5 people or contractors that ran the gamut all the way from large big box store like Home Depot to much smaller contractors, mom and pop type places, local that I'd never heard of before, because I wanted to get a range. I wanted to see what that whole scope of pricing would be and look at my options as far as brands of windows, etc., etc. And I had done this in the past with other contractors, and I would highly recommend it to you too. Definitely, it's time consuming, but especially on larger jobs, definitely get at least 3 different bids. You can kind of gather information in your meetings with these different contractors so you have something to compare and contrast your different bids amongst. It's a good idea. So anyway, that's what I did. I set up 4 or 5 appointments. Can't remember now off the top of my head. Might have been about 4. And one after the other, these contractors, their reps came into my home. We sat down in my dining room, and we kind of went over what my needs were and what their offerings were. Yeah, it's like I think each salesperson was like an hour long, sales spiel. Some of them brought little demonstration windows and put a heat lamp on one side and had me say, look, you can't feel the heat from this side, whatever, trying to prove how energy efficient they were. Kind of annoying, to be frank. But hey, everybody's trying to make a buck, right? But the last guy that came in was a smaller contractor that I found on that application Thumbtack I was telling you about, and he had good reviews. I'd gone to his website, and I'd actually done this for all of the people that came over. I looked up the companies, I looked at their reviews, etc., etc. So I had did a little bit of due diligence before they even came over to my house. But I'm going to definitely go into detail later what I should have done differently about that part. But anyway, back to the story. So he comes, and he's so much less irritating than these other salespeople. He seemed to really know what he was talking about with Windows. Um, you know, just laid back, no pressure sales. Yeah, just I mean, right off the bat, I was like, wow, this is the company I might want to go with. Now, in addition to that, and this was the kicker, he measured all my windows, and when he gave me the estimate, the written estimate, it like just blew the just everybody out of the water. I'm trying to remember back, but I think it was probably 30%, maybe 35%, something like that, cheaper than all the other bids for the same windows, for the same job. Now, of course, in hindsight, that's a big red flag. At the time, though, I didn't think much of it because, again, I've hired contractors for other large jobs, and I've taken bids from several different contractors for each one of those jobs, and it's not uncommon for prices to vary fairly wildly. It's just not. It's kind of the nature of the beast. So it didn't really stand out to me as a red flag. Now, of course, overarching rule is that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And I would definitely say keep that rule in your back pocket. Go by that rule whenever you're hiring contractors or anything, quite frankly, conducting any business. If it seems too good to be true, it really probably is. But anyway, it didn't stand out to me as being unrealistic. He explained it by telling me that he had other jobs in the area and that he was going to combine my order with these other people's orders, and that was going to lower the per window cost, and that he would pass that savings on to me. It seemed reasonable to me at the time. It would prove to be not, but in the moment it seemed it. So I got his contract, or he wrote up a contract, and I looked it over. I talked to my wife later in the evening, kind of, this is a really good deal. Let's do it. Pull the trigger. So I called him the next day. He came over to the house again, and I signed the contract. Part of that contract stipulated that there was a deposit to pay. Now, if you've ever hired a contractor, you know that that's totally common. It's very common for contractors to ask for deposits to pay for materials to make sure that they don't go out of pocket on a job that you will then cancel later. So it's a protection for the contractor, and I think totally valid one. But here in California, at least, you can't ask for more than 10% or $1,000, whichever is less of the total bid. Now, there's an exception to that rule, and I'll get into that later. But for the most part, a contractor can't ask for as much money as he did. I didn't know that at the time, though. He asked for 50% deposit. And me not being any wiser, I went ahead and I wrote him the check. So basically handed him cash, right? Once you write that check and you sign it and hand it over, it's cash, basically. So I gave him the deposit, and he went on his merry way, and I felt really, really excited about getting such a great deal on something we really needed for our home. Our current windows were really crappy. We were in need of new windows, and I was excited to have found such a good deal. So we had set the installation date 3 weeks out, and so I was waiting for that. But in the meantime, I thought, well, wait a minute, we need shades too. So a few days later, I'm like, I should call him up and see if he could do shades while we're at it. Just combine everything, make it simple. So I shot him a text a few days later, and I said, hey, do you do shades? And he said, of course I do. I said, okay, well, I'd really like to get an estimate on shades as well. So he came over the next day or a couple days later, and he dropped off books that had different styles and colors and manufacturers and everything. I don't know, like half a dozen books. So my wife and I, we went through those books, and we picked out some cellular shades that we really liked for our home, and had him give an estimate on them. And his estimate came back again about 35% or so less than other estimates we had gotten in the past when we had considered getting shades when we first moved into the home, but realized that it was more money than we had at the time to spend. So I'd had some previous bids to compare it to, and this was a great deal. So again, we wrote out a contract, and his deposit was 50%. So now for the second time, I've written him a check for 50% deposit. So still, I'm none the wiser. No red flags in my mind at the time. I think everything's going great. So about a week later, I get another bright idea. Okay, wait, so I got a great deal on shades. I got a great deal on windows. I really need exterior doors. We've got 3 exterior doors that are kind of falling apart. If he could give me such a great deal on these other things, maybe he could do doors too. And we could do it all at the same time. So again, I reach out to him and I say, hey, I'd like to get an estimate on 3 doors. Can you help me out? And of course, he replies, absolutely, no problem. So a little bit of back and forth. He sends me some links to some door manufacturers. My wife and I pick out styles that we like. We send it back. He builds us a quote, and price looks good. Very little over what the manufacturer's cost for the door was. Installation cost was going to be really minimal. And of course, his explanation was, hey, we're already doing so much work for you. We're already going to be there. I'll give you a really rock bottom, basement price for this. And so I said, fantastic. And so now for the 3rd time, I'm writing him a check for a 50% deposit. He comes over, grabs it, goes along his way. Now we're about a week out from our original installation date. So just to summarize, he's got 3 checks, 3 deposit checks for me, totaling $10,250. One for windows, one for doors, and one for shades. We're a week out from the install date. So night before that install date, I get a text. And the text says, I'm so sorry, but the window manufacturer actually made the windows incorrect. You were getting retrofit windows and they manufactured new construction windows. Wrong type. It's not going to work. We're going to have them remake those windows, and it's going to take another 3 weeks. And we'll save the doors and we'll save the shades, because remember, we're going to do them all at the same time. So we're going to push back the installation for everything another 3 weeks. Well, I mean, this is certainly frustrating. But at the time, it wasn't a red flag for me, because in previous large jobs that I'd had with other contractors, I'd had several delays, and it didn't seem extremely weird, or it wasn't a red flag that there was a delay. And he sent me pictures of the incorrectly manufactured windows, so I bought it. So he sets out he gives me a choice of like 3 dates that are about 3 weeks out. We agree on a date, and we go along our business. I'm frustrated, but I'm not worried. So now, fast forward, we're on the day of that second rescheduled installation date, and I'm laying in bed. It's a Saturday morning, and I get a text at about 6 a.m., wakes me up. And I pick up my phone, I'm groggy, half asleep, and I look at it, and it's from him, and it says, I am so terribly sorry, but my mother has passed away in New Jersey, and I've had to go to New Jersey at the last second to take care of her affairs and deal with this. I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to reschedule yet again. Well, nothing up until this point had been a red flag for me, but this sure was. This just did not feel right in my gut. I felt like, well, obviously it's possible that somebody's mother could pass away, of course, but it just didn't seem like this is the way a legitimate contractor would actually handle that with a customer. For one, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, why do you have to be here? Couldn't your crew start working on this stuff? I'm confused. Why do you have to be here? I didn't say that to him, but in my mind, that's what I was thinking. So I thought, well, let me go back and do a little more research. So I woke up, got out of bed, grabbed some coffee, got back on my computer, and I started searching this guy and his company again. Now remember, I told you I had done some due diligence previously before I even made the appointment, and I did. I Googled his company name, I Googled his name, I read the reviews on Thumbtack, and I felt like I had done my due diligence, but I did all that again to see if I had missed anything, and was still coming up with the same results. Everything seemed fine, no red flags. And then, right as about I was going to quit, and I was trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to handle this? How am I going to respond to him? On a whim, I decided to Google the phone number that he had been texting me and calling me from. So I Googled his phone number, and that's when it hit. That's when I found out. The whole first page of the Google results were reviews on Yelp and other places, Better Business Bureau, the California State Licensing Board, I think, might have had some stuff on their website, but it was just review after review after review of other victims who had had the exact same thing done to them. Different company names every time. I mean, I would say probably at least a half a dozen different company names he had used, if not more. But the phone number was the one consistent thing amongst all of those. He kept using the same phone number. So thankfully, people in their previous reviews had said, this guy at this number, at this company name, did this to me. So I'm reading all these reviews, and it was just one after another, the exact same story, exact same MO. This guy, says he's a contractor for shutters or shades or windows or doors, and he'll come to your house, and he seems really sweet and professional, and he'll sell you that stuff, and you'll write him a check for a deposit, and he'll ask for 50%, and he's gone with it, vanish. So, and that's exactly what happened to me. So, I mean, my heart just, oh my gosh, just fell right through the floor. I mean, when I realized that it was almost certainly the case that I had been taken, I just was devastated. So I go into my bedroom. My wife is still asleep there, and I woke her up. I didn't even know what to do. I just felt so devastated, and I said, "Oh my gosh, honey, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but we've had $10,000 stolen from us." And then that began an entirely separate journey that I'm going to break out in another video about what I did then. My experience in figuring out what to do now that I had $10,000 taken from me. So I'm going to put that in another video, and that's actually probably going to be a series of videos. And I'm actually still in the process even of dealing with that. It's not over yet. I have civilly I'm pursuing this. Criminally, it's being pursued. So I'm going to leave that for another video. But now in this video, let's talk about, now that I've told my story and you've kind of heard a little bit about it, I'm going to maybe try to summarize some of the things that I did wrong and some of the things that I should have done but didn't do that would have kept this from happening to me. So yeah, well, let's go into that. So I've got some notes here. So if you see me kind of looking off over here, because I really want to make sure that I touch on everything. And there's quite a few points here that I want to make. So please forgive me if it kind of looks like I'm looking at notes, because I am. So a couple things. I think right off the bat, and I'm going to say this, I mean, this is absolutely number one. The thing that I missed, that I didn't do, that I should have done, that would have saved me from all of this grief, was that I didn't look up his license number. That's number one. I didn't think of it. In California, there's a website, cslb.com, which is California State Licensing Board. They have a website that's really easy to use that you can search you can do a search on a license number. So if they give you a number, you can look it up to see if it's legitimate, or you can do a search on the company name. But it's really easy. It just takes a few seconds. It's totally free, and you can look to see if they're insured, bonded, licensed, if it's current, etc. If I would have done that one thing, it would have saved me from all this pain. So highly recommend, whenever you are looking for a contractor, first thing you do is look up their license. Don't even waste your time calling them. Don't even waste your time having them come over to your house and giving you an estimate. Just look up their license immediately, right off the bat. So number one, definitely verify that they're licensed. So a couple other things. I put a lot of emphasis on reviews. When I was looking online, I looked at reviews, and I'm totally used to doing that. When I buy anything on Amazon, I always look to read reviews. It's something that I really take into consideration whenever I'm buying anything, a product or service. Be careful though. Reviews can be faked. And they definitely are. And although I knew that at the time, I didn't really think about that much. I didn't take it into consideration. So I want to say, be careful. Make sure that you're looking at verified reviews. If they're reviews that are made by accounts that don't have any other reviews, they're new accounts, and there's just this one review and it's 5 stars, and they don't have any other reviews. Do a little research. Go a little bit deeper. Take that next step. and just try to verify that those reviews are actually legitimate. If I would have done that, that would have given me pause. I could have seen, okay, maybe something's going on here. Um, some of these things may seem a little bit more paranoid, I guess, but I'm still going to go over them. Obviously, if I would have searched this guy's phone number, just to make sure that it lined up with the company he said he was, that would have immediately tipped me off. I didn't think to do that. If you have any reason to kind of be concerned, is this person legit or not? Search their phone number. It's surprising how much information you can get on somebody, a company, or an individual person by just searching the phone number that they're using on Google. That would have saved me. Let's see. And another thing too. So in my specific case, he had actually stolen the logo and company name of a legitimate network of shade, shutter, window installers. Four Seasons. It's totally legitimate. So when I searched on that, and he just slightly changed it. His was Four Seasons Windows and Shades, and he added that Windows and Shades part. Well, when I Googled Four Seasons, guess what came up? The legitimate company name, not his, his fake enterprise. So he was riding the coattails. He was stealing the legitimacy, the credibility of an actual real business. Again, if I would have done a little cross-referencing, looked up his phone number, for example, I would have seen that it didn't go back to that company. I also should have scrutinized the URL that he gave me that was on his business card and letterhead and contract. Had I scrutinized that, I would have noticed that the URL was just a little bit shy of fully legitimate. It wasn't fourseasons.com. It was, the number 4 seasons windows and shades.com, a long kind of convoluted, slightly goofy URL. More often than likely, a legitimate company is not going to have a convoluted, goofy URL. So, look at that and kind of verify. Again, that wouldn't be a piece of information that would just by itself clue you in that you're dealing with somebody that's less than legitimate, but you add up all this information together and it could be useful. And a couple other small things. The address on his contract that I signed ended up being some random, it was like a storefront in the fashion district of LA in downtown. It didn't have anything to do with windows and shades and, but I didn't look it up. I didn't take the time. I didn't even think about it. And probably you wouldn't either in most cases. Obviously, if I would, the very first step I told you about, if I would have looked up his license, I wouldn't have had to done any of this other stuff. I would have seen that he wasn't legitimate from the get-go. But just depending on the situation, there are some jobs that you don't require a license, although they're far and few between. Every state is different. And so that's why I'm just breaking down all of these little steps, just in case they might be useful to you. Let's see. Here's an interesting one. When we were making setting up the first appointment, when he was coming over to my house, and we were texting back and forth, he rescheduled 2 or 3 times, and at the last minute in a case or two. Now, I didn't think a ton about it at the time, but thinking back on it now, I've got a couple points to make about that. One, even if a company's legitimate, if they're already rescheduling numerous times before, and they're trying to sell you, they're trying to get your money, and they can't even make an appointment on time, that's a red flag even if they are legitimate. You probably don't want a company who has a hard time being punctual, doing your work. They're probably going to have a problem doing that after they've taken your money. So, if they've got a problem doing it before they've even sold you. But the second point, and this is kind of interesting, for this particular case, his rescheduling was a way that he could try to avoid having a sting set up to serve him, to bust him. He would reschedule at the last minute so that nobody could kind of effectively coordinate a sting to serve him. And I'll get into that a little bit more later, but basically when I say serve him, I mean in order to carry out to take somebody to court in order to sue somebody, at least in California, small claims, you have to actually physically serve them court papers. They have to be physically served, and that has to be recorded. If you can't serve them, you can't sue them. So he was avoiding getting busted by rescheduling a bunch at the last minute, so that it would be very difficult for somebody to try to, set up a sting and serve him. So this is something I really want to touch on. When he was in my home, and we were sitting 6 feet away from each other, and he's selling me these windows, there was no red flags going on in my mind. None. And I thought that I was a really good judge of character. And I think you probably think you're a really good judge of character too. And don't take this personally, but I think the reality is, and there's been a lot of studies to back this up, is that in general, human beings, all of us, are nowhere near as good at telling if people are telling, at noticing if people are telling the truth or not. We're not nearly as good at that as we think we are. We're actually pretty bad at it, really bad at it. Even people who are trained. I was listening to an audiobook by Malcolm Gladwell called Talking to Strangers. I highly recommend it, by the way. It's a really good book. But his book goes into great detail about how bad we are at discerning whether people are telling the truth or lying to us. And a little bit of digression here, but it's actually evolutionarily kind of ingrained in us to err on the side of trusting people. So most of us, by far and away, the vast majority of us are going to err on the side of trusting someone. And that's what I did. And I put way too much stock into my intuitive feeling about what kind of person he was. I thought, well, surely if this guy is just flagrantly lying to me and he's sitting 6 feet away from me, I would know it. I didn't. And you might be sitting there saying, well, I'd be able to tell. No way somebody could lie to me like that. For your own good, please think about the possibility that you might not be as good at telling whether somebody's lying or not as you think you are. I put way too much emphasis in my intuitive feeling there, and it really burned me. It really did. So check out that book by Malcolm Gladwell. Look it up online if you want to research it. But and in general, human beings are not good at telling whether somebody's lying. So even people who are trained in it. Obviously, another red flag, the pricing. Look, if it's too good to be true, it almost certainly is. That should have been a red flag. Especially with all these other things, all these other red flags. But yeah, I mean, at any point in time, look, and this is another reason why it's good to get a series of estimates. If you've got a series of estimates and compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges, same brand windows, or whatever product or service you're looking at, make sure that all the variables are equal. But if you've got one bid that's an outlier, that's way over here, significantly cheaper, at the very least, ask a lot of questions as to why that is. Don't just assume it's okay. Don't just accept it. Ask why. And maybe it's not that the contractor is legitimate, but maybe it's that they're using inferior product, that they're maybe there's no guarantee or warranty. So there's got to be a reason. There just has to be a reason. So that should have been a red flag. So pay attention to that. If you've got a big outlier, and follow up on that. Really, really, really dig into why. So another huge one. Huge, huge, huge. 50% deposit. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the video. Look, in California, it's law that a contractor cannot ask for more than $1,000 or 10%, whichever is less. Now, there is an exception to this. If they have a general, I think it's called a performance bond that's with the California State Licensing Board, I'll put information about that in the comments or in the information below the description. There's really good information actually on that website, and I will link to that information, and you can read exactly what that exception is. But in general, that's the most that you can ask for a deposit. So clearly 50% was well above what he could have legally asked for. Even if he was a legitimate contractor, he couldn't ask for that. And I've actually had legitimate contractors ask me for more than 10% or $1,000, whichever was less. Now that I know that rule, I refuse to pay it. But at the time, I just didn't know. And had I gone to the California State Licensing Board website, well, I would have seen he wasn't licensed, and I would have seen that, I would have learned that he couldn't ask for more than 10% or $1,000. But I didn't know it at the time, and that burned me. So I'm telling you, at least in the state of California. Now, if you live in another state, check out your own specific laws in that state. There's a good chance that they do have limitations and regulations on that. So be sure that you're aware of them before you ever give anybody a dime. Let's see. I think if I would have noticed any of those red flags, I think that would have saved me. It's easy to kind of get overwhelmed. I had like several different contractor jobs happening at once. Life for most of us is pretty darn busy. And, shopping for contractors, negotiating with contractors, setting all that up takes a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. And so it's easy to forget to do some of these things. I'm reminding you, please take the time to do this. You'll save yourself a lot of time and money on the backside. Believe me, I've spent so much time tracking this guy down, trying to find recourse, trying to help other victims that I have found that he's left in his wake. Boy, it sure would have saved me a lot of pain and a lot of time had I done even a few of these things. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that it's been maybe an interesting story. I hope that you can kind of see that this can happen to anybody. That's another thing I want to touch on real quickly. I didn't think that this could happen to me before it did. I thought that I was a smart guy. I thought that I could intuitively read people. And I got totally took by this guy. But there's a really important point that I want to make in wrapping up this first video here. And that is that if this has happened to you, know that it isn't your fault. When it happened to me, I felt really, really horrible. I felt like I had failed my wife. I thought that I had failed myself. I felt embarrassed, ashamed. I felt horrible, but I gave it some thought, and thankfully it didn't take long. But I realized, wait a minute, I may have missed some things that I should have done, but this isn't my fault. It's his fault. He purposely, premeditatedly manipulated me and deceived me and stole from me using deception. It's his fault. It's not mine. Now, because it's two different things, right? Yes, I could have kept myself from doing it had I known some more things. But being ignorant of something doesn't make it your fault. You didn't ask for it to happen to you. So I want to remind you, if something like this has happened to you, it's not your fault. Don't take ownership of that as if you had deserved it. You don't. The person who did it to you, that's whose fault it is. So I'm going to end on that. I hope this has been useful. Once again, if you've got any questions, if you've got other advice, if you've been through this and you have some advice to share, or if you're a contractor, please share your advice in the comments. Ask any questions that you've got. I'm going to tell you that I'm working on other videos that are going to be coming soon. I think the next video that I'm going to post is going to be a video that's going to outline what happened after I found out this guy was a crook, and what I did to pursue him criminally with the police, and what I did to pursue him civilly in court, and all the steps that took, and all the things that I had to do, is from hiring private investigators to filing court paperwork to putting together a dossier to go to the police so that they would actually take action and do something. It's not simple like I thought. My first thought was, as soon as I realized what happened, it was, okay, I better go to the police. I'm going to go to the police right now. Thankfully, I didn't. But I'm going to tell you what you can do and how to do it, and give you some advice on how to be heard and how to motivate people to follow up and take action. Unfortunately, in a lot of places, fraud is just not pursued the way other types of crime are. It's just not, sadly. California out here is definitely a place where the fraud is just not pursued the way a lot of other crimes are. So you sometimes have to do extra work, unfortunately, as the victim. You have to do work to get the state to take action. So I'm going to go over a lot of that stuff and tell the rest of my story and get caught up to present time, where I'm still very much dealing with this. I'm also going to potentially make more videos that go into some more detail about some of these steps, some of the things that I could have done, vetting a contractor, negotiating with a contractor, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope that it's been helpful. For me, it's a catharsis to kind of tell my story. So it's been helpful for me too. But thank you so much again for watching. Boy, if you've stuck with it all the way to here, you are a trooper. Anyway, say hi in the comments. If you are looking for a contractor, I wish you great luck. Find a good one and be happy. And if you have been scammed, I am so sorry. And I hope that you can find happy, successful recourse. And I hope this helps. All right, until next time, thank you guys so much. Bye-bye.